Now, what were you taught at school? Algebra? I had a little bit of algebra. Sonnets by Shakespeare? Yeah, certainly had a few of those. But you probably weren't told how to deliver first aid. That could actually be a big problem, because a new study by the British Heart Foundation has found that more than 95% of adults do not know how to save lives in an emergency. So there's a push now to make it compulsory in schools, part of the curriculum. Let's talk to one pupil, Sarah Salami, who saved her father's life just 2 weeks after learning CPR in a lesson, along with her teacher, Emily Mottershead, and Simon Gillespie, the Chief Executive of the British Heart Foundation. Good to see you all this morning, especially good to see you, Sarah. 2 weeks after lessons on CPR, what happened with your dad?
After I'd learned CPR at school 2 weeks ago, my dad had a heart attack, which then led on to a cardiac arrest, and I ended up performing CPR on him.
And so because you'd had the lessons quite recently, did your brain just kick in, or did you have to really sort of think about what you had to do?
I mean, at this moment, I was in shock and panic, so I just thought about the first thing that I knew how to do, and that happened to be CPR. So that's what I did.
And CPR, I mean, let's be honest, I mean, I was very lucky. I was in St John's Ambulance, so I learnt these things when I was a teenager. CPR is actually quite difficult to do in a way, isn't it? It takes a bit of, you know, a bit of strength and a bit of effort, and you worry about hurting someone when you do it.
Yeah, of course I was worried because his ribs were clicking.
Yeah.
But then I just kept on going because I need to reach the heart.
Wow. But I mean, why did the school, Emily, decide to teach this?
I'm quite passionate about first aid. I've been with St John's as well, and also as a lifeguard when I was younger. I do think first aid is one of those really important life skills where you can save somebody's life, make a really difference.
I mean, it's one of those things, though, isn't it, that you talk. I mean, you spent years in St John's Ambulance. I've never actually performed CPR or recovery position on anybody. I've never needed to, thankfully. The fact that one of your pupils has been put in this situation so quickly.
No, I mean, I'm incredibly
proves that
proud.
It works.
No, I'm really proud of her as well. I mean, I'd dread to think what I'll be like in that situation with a family member as well. But the resources we've had to teach the students allows them to be able to have hands-on experience, where sometimes if you just get one mannequin and just show them what to do, they're not necessarily going to know how to do it, but they are using the resources we had from the British Heart Foundation. So I was actually able to practice it and then replicate it on the father.
I mean, Simon, this is, I think, absolutely amazing, because you're really seeing this work in practice in Sarah's case.
Yeah, the outcome is fabulous. It's been my privilege, actually, to have met with Sarah a number of times. She's quite a remarkable young woman, and what we want to do as part of this coalition with St John Ambulance, with the British Red Cross, is to make every child a lifesaver. The government are consulting now about whether first aid training should be essentially compulsory in schools. Our firm belief is that it should be, because whilst you have really committed people like Emily and teachers in schools who want to commit to this and use the facilities that the British Heart Foundation and other organisations provide, too many kids are just slipping through the net, basically. And we know from international experience that if we want to increase survival rates for cardiac arrest, for example, then you've got to train cohorts of school students so that they become adults who are confident enough to step in. Because in these sort of situations, the worst thing's nothing.
It's a no-brainer, that, isn't it? And you end up with a population who, you know, I don't know, 99% of them can act as lifesavers. I mean, why wouldn't you want that?
Well, you would think it was a no-brainer, wouldn't you? But we still haven't been able to convince government to include it within the syllabus.
But there are resource issues, I guess.
Well, there are some of those, but actually, in order to learn CPR, using the training scheme that the British Heart Foundation provides, takes about an hour. Now, kids spend about 1,000 hours in school every year, so over the course of, 5, 6, 7 years in secondary education, you're looking at 1 hour for CPR training out of all those thousands of hours. And it's a skill that you might use within weeks, as Sarah did. It's a skill which you might never use. I mean, I used to be in the armed forces. I was trained when I joined the armed forces 40 years ago, and I've never used it since. But what I do know is that I'm actually equipped to use it.
What about it being a perishable skill? I mean, do you feel teaching this that actually children do need topping up occasionally?
Oh yes, I mean, we're lucky enough to work in a school where we have PHSE drop-down days as well as in form time we do PHSE, so we do this once a year in Key Stage 3 because it's important, because you would forget it. I think you mentioned you did it in primary school and she forgot it until she learnt again in Year 9.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point, isn't it? Because I mean, I have to say, I would like a refresher course. Now, this reminds me very much that I've probably lost a lot of that knowledge now?
Well, I think there's some key messages. Firstly, all the evidence we have is actually that you retain something, and the most important thing is the knowledge that you need to do something. Doing nothing in these circumstances where somebody is unconscious, unresponsive, and they're not breathing or not breathing normally, you have to assume they've had a cardiac arrest. And if you do nothing, for every minute you leave them, their chances of survival drop off by 10%. So waiting for the even if you dialed 999, and not everybody does automatically, even if you dialed 999, by the time the paramedics arrive, they may not be savable. So the worst thing is doing nothing. Don't worry too much about getting it wrong or about hurting somebody, because yes, it can be hard work, but if you've been trained in it, even if it's 40 odd years ago, actually enough will come back. And these days, if you're dialing 999, put your smartphone onto speaker, and the emergency operator will help you, will talk you through it, and will encourage it. But if that's against a baseline of at least some experience, that's much, much better than nothing.
Yeah, you know, your dad must have been proud of you to start with, Sarah. What does he think now? I mean, you have literally saved his life.
Yeah, I mean, me and my dad have always had a really good relationship in general. So, yeah, I'm just really happy and I'm thankful that I have him back.
Yeah, absolutely. What a brilliant, brilliant story. Thank you all very much indeed. And you're quite right. Just a final thought, actually, Simon. What about the rest of us who are obviously not at school? How do we get refreshed?
Yeah, well, lots of organisations, so British Red Cross, St John's and British Heart Foundation, supply kit or training or whatever. We do a lot of training with organisations for adults, so you're never too old to learn this, or never too old to top up your skills. And actually, it's a great way of icebreakers at conferences and things like that, because it gets you moving, it gets you dynamic, but you're learning or relearning a really important skill.
Yeah, love it. Sarah, Emily, Simon, thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you.
Great advice there. Now, let's find out what's coming.